I walked past my old office today. The same windows. The same faces. And for the first time, I didn't envy them. I pitied them. I used to think silence meant failure. If the phone wasn't buzzing, if my calendar wasn't full, if there wasn't something urgent waiting for me in my inbox, I felt useless. So I filled every empty space with noise, calls, emails, meetings, late nights pretending I was chasing dreams instead of running from fear. It wasn't ambition that drove me, not really. It was fear of stopping. Because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant realizing that maybe, beneath all of it, the titles, the promotions, the good job, man from people I didn't even like, there was nothing real. I wore exhaustion like a medal. It meant I mattered. I remember standing in front of the mirror one morning, tie half done, eyes bloodshot, whispering, "You're almost there." But I didn't even know where there was. Just further. Always further. My apartment looked like success. Floor-to-ceiling windows, espresso machine that cost more than a month's rent, art I didn't understand but bought because it looked like something a successful man would own. At night, I'd look at the skyline, the endless glow of office lights, and wonder how many of them hid someone just like me working themselves to death to prove they were alive. It's strange how you can surround yourself with everything you thought you wanted and still feel completely hollow. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. sometimes, laptop still open, spreadsheet glaring, heart pounding for no reason I could name. And then, in the quiet that followed, I'd feel it, that small, gnawing voice inside whispering, "This isn't living." But I drowned it out, again and again. More work, more noise. Because as long as I kept moving, no one, not even me, could see how lost I really was. People called me reliable, driven, focused. They had no idea that behind every "of course, I'll handle it," there was a man crumbling quietly under the weight of his own expectations. I said yes to everything, not because I cared, but because saying no felt like failure. I remember one Friday night, sitting at my desk long after everyone left. The city outside was alive, laughter, cars, life, and there I was, chasing another deadline for a company that would replace me in a week if I dropped dead. And yet, when my boss sent a one-line email, "Great work today," I felt a pathetic sense of pride. Like a starving man grateful for crumbs. Sometimes I wonder when it started, when work stopped being something I did and became something I was. Maybe it was that first promotion. Or maybe it was the day my father called to say he was proud of me, and for the first time, I felt worth something. Funny thing about external validation, once you get a taste, you'll spend the rest of your life starving for it. But I didn't know any of that then. Back then, the noise was my heartbeat. The grind was my religion. And the silence, the very thing I now crave, was my greatest fear. Because silence meant I had to listen. And I wasn't ready to hear the truth. It started like any other Monday, gray sky, cold coffee, and the illusion of control. I walked into the office at 7:42 a.m., exactly the same time I always did. My badge beeped against the scanner, and that familiar mechanical tone greeted me like a ritual, proof I still belonged somewhere. The lobby smelled of burnt espresso and printer ink. A few colleagues nodded at me, polite smiles, eyes already dulled by fluorescent light. Nothing felt different. Not yet. Then I saw my boss standing by my desk. He never came down from the top floor. He didn't have to. That's what middle management was for people like me, who absorbed the pressure so he didn't have to get his hands dirty. But there he was, suit immaculate, face unreadable. "Can we talk?" he asked. 3 words, calm, practiced. Corporate death sentences are always polite. We went into a glass conference room, the kind that looks transparent but feels suffocating. He didn't sit. Neither did I. He just sighed and said it. "We're restructuring." Restructuring. That's what they call it when they tear your life apart with a smile. He handed me an envelope, my name printed neatly on the front, and started talking in that detached HR tone. About severance, gratitude, performance. I didn't hear most of it. My ears rang. My mind went blank. All I could think was, this is it. Years of loyalty, weekends lost, birthdays missed, all summarized in a 2-page document. He said, "We appreciate your contributions." I wanted to laugh. My contributions? I gave this place everything, and now it thanked me for it like I was returning a library book. When I got home, I didn't take my coat off. I just stood in the doorway, staring at the city outside my window. It looked the same as always, people rushing, horns blaring, but I was on the outside now. The world was moving without me. I dropped my office badge on the counter. The sound it made, that small, plastic clatter, was deafening. That sound marked the end of something I didn't even realize was my entire identity. I opened my laptop by instinct, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I checked my inbox, nothing. No new emails. No tasks. No calendar invites. The silence that I used to crave now felt like a void swallowing me whole. I sat there for hours, waiting for someone to notice. No one did. Not a single message. By midnight, I turned off the laptop, but the silence followed me into bed. I kept thinking about how strange it felt to be unneeded. For years, people called, emailed, demanded things. And now, nothing. I had become invisible overnight. The next morning, I woke up early out of habit. I made coffee, ironed a shirt, even checked traffic as if I still had somewhere to go. I caught myself halfway through tying my tie and laughed, the sound dry and bitter. What was I doing? Performing the routine of a life that no longer existed. Days passed. The city felt louder, but somehow emptier. I tried to convince myself it was an opportunity, a fresh start, a blessing in disguise. That's what people say when they don't know how to grieve something invisible. Because that's what it was, grief. Not for the job, but for the version of me that existed only because of it. I walked around aimlessly, past cafes full of people working on laptops, past bus stops with commuters staring blankly at their phones. I envied them, their purpose, their direction, even their exhaustion. Then one day, I passed by the office building again. The glass facade reflected the sky, cold and unfeeling. I watched people walk in and out, new faces, younger faces. The world had already moved on. And in that reflection, I saw myself a ghost watching a life that used to be mine. That's when I realized how fragile everything I'd built really was. It only took one meeting, one envelope, one polite smile to erase it all. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind that forces you to face yourself. And for the first time in years, I didn't know who I was without the noise. The first few days felt like a strange kind of vacation. I told myself I deserved it, that I'd been working nonstop for years, that this was a chance to breathe, to finally rest. I said all the right things to everyone who called. Yeah, I'm just taking some time to reset. It's actually a good thing. I needed the break. But it wasn't rest. It was avoidance disguised as control. Every morning I still woke up at 6:30, brewed my coffee, sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop, pretending I had somewhere to be. I'd open random documents, scroll through job listings, draft cover letters I never sent. The motions were the same, the meaning was gone. By the second week, the routine started to rot from the inside. The silence between keystrokes grew unbearable. The hum of the refrigerator felt like a taunt. When you've spent your entire adult life chasing productivity, doing nothing feels like suffocating. I tried to fill the hours with self-improvement. Books on resilience, podcasts about reinvention, even meditation apps that promised to quiet the mind. But the truth was, I didn't want quiet. Quiet meant I had to listen to myself. And I didn't like what I heard. Every failure, every compromise, every late night I justified as commitment, it all came rushing back. I'd given everything to a job that replaced me in a day. And in return, I'd lost the ability to exist without it. My phone stayed silent. Days went by without a single message from anyone. I realized how many of my friends had only existed in the glow of office screens, how many relationships had been built on shared exhaustion instead of genuine connection. I told myself I didn't need anyone. That I liked the solitude. But at night, when the city lights flickered against the walls, I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling, heart racing for no reason, wishing someone would just text me, "Hey, are you okay?" They didn't. And that's when the anxiety started. It was small at first, a tightening in the chest, a heartbeat that seemed too loud. Then one afternoon, it hit me out of nowhere. I was in the grocery store, staring at a shelf of cereal boxes, and suddenly, the colors blurred. My lungs refused to work. My vision tunneled. People kept walking past me like I was invisible, like a glitch in their perfect routines. I crouched on the cold floor, gasping, gripping the edge of the shelf, praying for it to stop. It didn't. Not right away. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just between jobs. I was broken. When I finally got home, I sat on the floor and cried, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, uncontrollable shaking. I didn't even know what I was crying for. The job? The years I'd wasted? The person I thought I was? Maybe all of it. I stopped answering calls. I stopped opening emails. Days blurred together. The only thing marking time was the light moving across the room. At some point, I started talking to myself, not out loud, but in my head, trying to reason with the chaos. You're just tired. You'll figure it out. But even my own voice sounded foreign now, like an echo from someone I used to be. My apartment, once sleek and impressive, began to feel like a cage. Every clean surface reminded me of who I used to be: organized, controlled, successful. I started avoiding mirrors. Every reflection looked like an accusation. There was a night, maybe 2 weeks in, when I almost packed a bag. I didn't know where I'd go, I just wanted to leave. To escape the air that felt too heavy, the silence that screamed too loud. But where do you run when the thing you're running from is inside you? I turned on the TV for background noise, but even that became unbearable. Every ad was for productivity tools, career programs, success stories. Everyone seemed to be moving forward while I was sinking. That's when I started drinking again. Not much, just enough to blur the edges, to soften the noise in my head. One glass became two, then the bottle stayed open overnight. I told myself it helped me sleep. But it wasn't sleep. It was escape. The funny part is, no one noticed. I could have vanished, and it might have taken weeks for anyone to realize. That's when the bitterness started to grow toward the company, the system, the world that teaches you your value ends where your job title does. But underneath the bitterness was fear. A quiet, unbearable fear that maybe I'd built a life so hollow that without the noise, there was nothing left to fill it. I wish I could say I had a moment of clarity, that I stood up one morning and decided to change. But the truth is, I didn't. Change doesn't come from a spark. It comes from exhaustion. From reaching the point where even standing still hurts too much. And that's where I was, not ready to move, not able to stay. That's when I saw it. The reflection. A man I barely recognized, sitting in the same chair, staring at the same dead screen, waiting for someone else to tell him what to do next. That's when the fall truly began. It happened one morning without warning, no breakdown, no dramatic music, no moment of divine clarity. Just a quiet pause. I woke up to the same silence that had been haunting me for weeks, but for the first time, I didn't try to fight it. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't check the time. I just lay there. Breathing. Listening. The sunlight came through the blinds in thin, uneven lines. Dust floated in the air, slow and indifferent. And for a second, I realized nothing was asking anything of me. There was no meeting to join, no deadline to chase, no voice expecting a reply. It was terrifying. And liberating. When I finally got up, I walked into the bathroom, turned on the tap, and splashed cold water on my face. Then I looked in the mirror, really looked. Not at the stubble or the tired eyes or the wrinkles carved by years of pretending I had it together. But at the person behind all that. He looked lost. But also free. It struck me how long it had been since I'd seen myself without a purpose. For years, every reflection had been filtered through roles: manager, employee, achiever, the guy who always delivered. But this version of me had none of that. Just a man, standing in his bathroom, stripped of everything he thought made him valuable. I whispered, "What do you even want?" The question hung there, unanswered, almost ridiculous. What kind of man reaches his late 30s and realizes he doesn't know what he wants? But that was the truth, I didn't know. I'd spent so long chasing what I was supposed to want that I'd forgotten to ask what I actually needed. That day, I didn't open the laptop. I didn't pretend to be busy. I made coffee and sat on the floor by the window, watching people outside rush to work. They looked just like I used to, heads down, earbuds in, convinced that speed equals meaning. I wondered if they were happy. Or if, like me, they were just afraid to slow down long enough to find out. Later, I took a walk, the first one without a destination. I passed a park I'd driven by 100 times but never entered. I sat on a bench, surrounded by strangers, and for the first time in months, I felt present. No pressure to be anywhere else. No need to explain myself. It was strange how something so simple, sitting still, felt like rebellion. But as I watched a father teaching his daughter to ride a bike, I felt something shift inside me. Not joy exactly, but something close. Maybe relief. Maybe recognition. That evening, I went through my emails. I didn't respond to any of them. I just deleted old threads, hundreds of messages, years of digital noise that had defined my worth. Each click felt lighter. Delete. 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 And then I found one. An old email from my father, sent years ago. The subject line just said, "Proud of you." I opened it, read the one-line message, "You've made something of yourself, son." Back then, it had meant everything. Now, it made me pause. Because the truth was, I hadn't made anything. I'd built a shell. A life that looked impressive but felt hollow. And for the first time, I wondered, would he still be proud if he saw who I'd become now? The thought stayed with me all night. I poured myself another drink, but this time, it tasted bitter. I wasn't trying to forget anymore. I was trying to understand. I realized that I'd been living my life like it was a race, one with no finish line, no prize, just motion for the sake of motion. And maybe it was okay to stop running. The next morning, I wrote a list. Not a to-do list, not a plan, just things I remembered liking once. Music. Photography. Cooking. Talking to people without checking the time. It felt ridiculous. But it was something. That night, I dreamed for the first time in months. I was standing in an empty office, lights flickering, papers flying around me like leaves. But instead of chasing them, I just stood there, letting them go. When I woke up, I didn't feel fixed. I wasn't suddenly happy or enlightened. But there was a calmness, a strange steadiness in my chest. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to be anyone. I just had to be here. The world doesn't let you disappear quietly. It waits for a while, then starts knocking again, polite at first, then louder. It started with messages from old colleagues. "Hey, man, heard what happened. You okay?" Followed by, "You should really apply for this opening at Orion Group. They're hiring people with your experience." There was no malice in it. Just habit. The professional version of small talk, keeping the machine oiled, staying useful. I ignored the first few. Then one night, a friend from work, Mark, called me. We used to get drinks together after long days, talking about how burnt out we were, pretending it was funny. He said, "Come out, man. It's been months. We all miss you." So I went. It was a Thursday. The bar was the same, too loud, too bright, the same forced laughter echoing between glass and wood. For a while, I even managed to blend in again. The stories, the sarcasm, the tired jokes about deadlines and bosses. But halfway through my second drink, I realized something, they weren't talking to each other. They were performing. Just like I used to. Mark leaned in. "You still not working?" I shrugged. Thinking about my options. He laughed. "Man, I'd kill for a break. You're living the dream." I almost smiled. The dream. If only he knew. Later that night, as I walked home through the city, I noticed how everyone around me was rushing somewhere. Faces lit by phone screens, footsteps quick, shoulders tense. And for the first time, I didn't envy them. I pitied them. The next morning, I got an email from a recruiter. Exciting opportunity for a senior position. My finger hovered over the reply button longer than I'd like to admit. I could go back. It would be easy. Money. Stability. The illusion of purpose. All I had to do was step back into the cage and close the door behind me. But I didn't. I closed the laptop instead. That same afternoon, my sister called. We hadn't talked much, I'd missed most family events for years, always too busy. She sounded hesitant, like she didn't know which version of me she was talking to. "Mom's been worried," she said. "You're not answering anyone." "I'm fine," I lied. "You don't sound fine." I wanted to argue, but she was right. I wasn't fine. But I was trying to be something else real. She paused. "You know, Dad always said you'd work yourself into the ground. I think you scared him a little." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd spent half my life trying to make him proud, and now he was gone. What was left to prove? After the call, I sat by the window, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. The city looked smaller now. Not because it had changed, because I had. A few days later, Mark texted again. "You're wasting your potential, man. You could run your own department anywhere. Don't throw it away." I stared at the message for a long time before typing, maybe I already did. Then I deleted it and just sent, "Thanks." It's strange, when you start changing, the people around you panic. They see it as a threat. They want the version of you they understand, the one that fits neatly into their world. But once you've seen the cracks in that world, you can't unsee them. I started volunteering at a community kitchen near my neighborhood. It wasn't much chopping vegetables, serving meals, but it was grounding. No deadlines. No hierarchy. Just people, tired and real, sharing space. One man, probably in his 60s, looked at me one day and said, "You used to wear a suit, didn't you?" I laughed. "How'd you guess?" He grinned. "You still stand like you're waiting for permission." That hit harder than I expected. Because he was right. Even now, I was waiting for someone to tell me what I was supposed to do next. But there was no boss anymore. No next project. Just me. One night, after volunteering, I passed by my old office again. The lights were still on, same as always. I saw a young guy sitting at my old desk, his face buried in a screen. I wondered if he thought he was chasing success, or if he already felt the weight of it pressing down. For a second, I almost pitied him. Then I realized he was me, just at an earlier chapter. And maybe, one day, he'd end up here too, staring through the glass, trying to remember when it all stopped feeling worth it. The world pushes back, always. It doesn't like when you stop playing by its rules. But the more it tried to pull me back in, the clearer it became I couldn't go back, even if I wanted to. The man who thrived on chaos was gone. And in the silence that replaced him, I finally started to hear something new. Not noise. Not fear. Just life. Rebuilding doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts small, almost invisible. Washing a sink full of dishes instead of leaving them for tomorrow. Answering one message instead of ignoring them all. Waking up without a plan, but getting out of bed anyway. That's how it began for me, quietly, awkwardly, without a clue what I was doing. After months of numbness, I started to crave routine again, but not the kind that killed me before. Something gentler. Real. I began taking long walks in the mornings. At first, just around the block. Then down to the park, across the bridge, sometimes all the way to the river. I'd watch the water move endlessly forward, never rushing, never stopping. I envied that kind of balance. I started cooking again. Not the throw something together while checking emails kind of cooking. Real cooking. Cutting onions slowly, burning the first batch of pancakes, learning to make coffee that didn't taste like bitterness and ambition. There was something healing in creating things with my hands instead of spreadsheets. One day, while walking through a flea market, I found an old film camera. I used to love photography in college, before real life told me it wasn't practical. I bought it without thinking. The seller smiled. "Most people just use their phones now," he said. "Maybe that's the problem," I replied. I began taking pictures again, nothing special, just small things, a cracked window, a child chasing pigeons, an old man feeding stray cats. I didn't post them anywhere. I didn't even tell anyone I was doing it. For once, I didn't need an audience. It felt strange, this new rhythm of life, no metrics, no deadlines, no constant validation. Sometimes I'd still wake up panicked, thinking I was late for a meeting that no longer existed. Sometimes I'd stare at my bank account and feel a familiar knot in my stomach, the one that whispered, "You're falling behind." But other times, I'd sit by the window at sunset, camera on the table, the city buzzing softly below, and feel something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not happiness, that would be too simple. But peace. A few weeks later, I got a message from an old colleague, Julia. We'd worked on countless projects together, stayed up late in offices lit only by monitors. She wrote, "I quit. Couldn't do it anymore." We met for coffee, awkward at first, then easy. She looked tired but lighter somehow. "I thought you'd judge me," she said. I laughed. "You have no idea how proud I am." We talked for hours about everything and nothing. When we said goodbye, she hugged me and said, "You look different." Maybe I am. After that, I started meeting more people, not networking, just connecting. A guy from the kitchen project who taught me how to make soup for 50 people. A retired teacher who spent afternoons painting in the park. They all carried their own quiet stories, their own small rebuilds. I realized something then: life doesn't collapse all at once, and it doesn't rebuild that way either. It's a process of tiny moments stacking on top of each other until one day you look around and realize the walls aren't caving in anymore. Still, not every day was good. Some were heavy, full of self-doubt. I'd look at job listings and wonder if I should go back. The temptation was always there, the safety of a paycheck, the structure, the illusion of progress. But every time I almost gave in, I'd remember the sound of that plastic badge hitting the counter. That small, hollow clatter that marked the end of who I used to be. So instead of sending out applications, I started freelancing, small projects, nothing glamorous. It wasn't about ambition anymore. It was about seeing if I could build something honest this time. It was harder than I expected. No team, no guidance, no safety net. Just me and the blank screen. But there was freedom in it too. If I failed, it was mine. If I succeeded, it was mine too. One night, while editing photos from the market, I realized something. The man in the pictures, the one behind the camera, didn't look lost anymore. Still unsure, yes. Still figuring things out. But alive. And that's when I understood what rebuilding really meant. It wasn't about reclaiming what I'd lost. It was about learning to live without needing to. Because maybe the point isn't to get back to who you were before the fall. Maybe it's to become someone who no longer needs to fall to feel alive. The past has a way of knocking when you finally start feeling safe again. It doesn't ask permission, it just walks back in, wearing a familiar face, speaking in a language you thought you'd forgotten. For me, it came as an email. Subject line, "We need to talk." It was from Daniel, my old boss. The man who'd handed me that white envelope months ago. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then curiosity won. I opened it. "We're expanding. Things have changed since you left. We'd like to discuss a potential leadership position, flexible terms, full creative control." I know this might sound sudden, but I think it's time. Time. That word hit harder than I expected. I stared at the screen for a long while. There it was, the thing I'd been conditioned to crave. Validation. Recognition. A ticket back into the world I'd worked so hard to escape. And for a few minutes, I let myself imagine it. Walking through those glass doors again. Hearing people say my name with respect. Feeling that old pulse of importance in my chest. The suit. The meetings. The pressure. The noise. It was almost intoxicating. Almost. But then I felt something else, a quiet unease, the same one I used to drown in caffeine in late nights. I realized I was holding my breath. The thought of going back didn't make me feel proud. It made me feel small. I closed the laptop. Walked to the window. The city was glowing in the dusk, the same view I used to mistake for purpose. I watched a man in a suit hurry across the street, phone pressed to his ear, lips moving fast. He looked exactly like I did, the version of me that used to think he was winning. I whispered, not again. Still, the email lingered in my head. All day, all night. It was more than an offer. It was a mirror, asking, have you really changed? The next morning, I took my camera and went for a walk, trying to clear my thoughts. The park was quiet, leaves turning gold, the air sharp with autumn. I took a few photos, a child blowing bubbles, an old couple sharing coffee on a bench. Simple, ordinary beauty. The kind I'd never noticed before. Halfway through the park, my phone buzzed again. Daniel. Would love to grab lunch. Just talk. I almost deleted it. But I didn't. Maybe part of me still needed closure. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I could face it without losing who I'd become. We met at a sleek cafe downtown, the kind where everything smelled like money and desperation. Daniel looked exactly the same, confident, polished, the kind of man who never seemed to question his place in the world. He smiled when he saw me. You look good, man. Relaxed. Different. Yeah, I said. Something like that. We talked for a while, or rather, he talked. About the company, the growth, the new direction. Then he leaned in and said, you know, we really could use someone like you again. Someone who understands the system. There it was, the hook. He was offering me a lifeline, or maybe a leash. I appreciate it, I said carefully. But I'm not sure that's my world anymore. He frowned. Don't tell me you're still doing that volunteer thing. I smiled. Yeah. Among other things. He laughed softly, shaking his head. You're wasting yourself. You were one of the best. Why throw it away? The old me would have flinched. Would have felt the sting of those words, the need to defend, to prove him wrong. But instead, I just said, maybe I got tired of proving anything. He looked confused, like I'd just spoken in a language he didn't understand. You're really not coming back, are you? No, I said quietly. I already did. Just not there. He nodded slowly, almost respectfully. But I saw it in his eyes, pity. That corporate kind of pity reserved for people who've stepped off the conveyor belt. He paid for the coffee, shook my hand, and said, good luck finding whatever it is you're looking for. I smiled. I already did. You just can't put it on a resume. When I left the cafe, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt peaceful. Like I just closed a chapter that had been stuck open for too long. As I walked home, the air felt different. Lighter. Every sound sharper, footsteps, laughter, the faint hum of life around me. And that's when I realized I wasn't running anymore. Not from the past. Not toward the future. Just walking. Later that night, I sat by the window again. The city still looked the same, but I didn't. I wasn't the man who needed to be seen anymore. I didn't crave validation or titles. Because the breaking point had come back, and this time, it didn't break me. Peace doesn't arrive with a grand moment of clarity. It doesn't announce itself or light up the sky like redemption. It slips in quietly, in between the moments you're too distracted to notice. For me, it began with laughter. Not mine, someone else's. I was at the community kitchen one afternoon, washing dishes with a woman named Anna. She was in her 50s, small and energetic, always humming some tune from the 80s. She cracked a joke about the mountain of pots we were scrubbing, and before I knew it, I was laughing, really laughing, for the first time in what felt like years. It wasn't the hollow, polite kind you use in boardrooms. It was real, messy, uncontrollable. The kind that shakes something loose inside you. When I got home that night, I realized I hadn't thought about work, or my past, or what came next. I just lived. For one afternoon, I'd been completely present. The next morning, I woke up to rain tapping against the window. Normally, I would have hated that sound. It used to mean delays, inconvenience, unproductive hours. But now, it felt comforting, like the world was reminding me that it didn't owe me constant motion. I made coffee, turned on some music, and sat by the window with my camera. The city outside looked softer in the rain. People hurried under umbrellas, headlights glowed on wet streets, and everything felt slower, quieter. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. I was exactly where I needed to be. I started photographing moments like that more often, the in-betweens, the pauses. A child's hand reaching for a pigeon, the way sunlight hit an empty cafe table, the wrinkles on a stranger's face when they smiled. It wasn't art. It wasn't about perfection. It was about really seeing the world again. Sometimes, I'd print the photos and hang them on my wall. My apartment, once sterile and lifeless, started to look like a home. Each picture was a piece of the world I'd ignored for so long. A few months later, Julia, my old coworker who'd also quit, invited me to an exhibition. You should bring your camera, she said. I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I was ready to be around people again, especially in a setting that reminded me of the old life. But I went. The gallery was small, filled with local artists and curious strangers. I wandered quietly, taking photos, when someone tapped my shoulder. Do you sell your work? A woman asked. I laughed. No, it's just a hobby. She smiled. You've got an eye. Don't waste it. I didn't know how to respond, but the compliment stayed with me. Not because of what it meant, but because of how it felt gentle, genuine, without expectation. Later that night, Julia and I grabbed dinner. She told me she'd started her own small consulting business, taking only clients she actually liked. It's not big, she said, but it's mine. I smiled. That's the best part. On the way home, I realized how much lighter the city felt now. The same streets that once felt suffocating were alive again, full of possibility, not pressure. I wasn't measuring myself against the world anymore. I was just part of it. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the quiet became my new normal. I didn't need constant distractions anymore. Silence didn't scare me, it grounded me. There were still bad days, of course. Moments when fear crept in, whispering that maybe I'd made a mistake, that maybe I'd thrown away too much. But those moments passed quicker now. They didn't control me. One morning, I got another email, a stranger this time. It was about the volunteer work. Someone had seen a few of my photos online. Apparently, Anna had shared them with the local community page. The message read, "Your pictures made me stop scrolling. Thank you for reminding me to look up." It was such a small thing. But it felt huge. Because for the first time, I realized I was creating something that mattered, not for profit, not for prestige, but for connection. I went out for a walk that evening, the city humming softly around me. The sky was clear, the kind of blue that fades into pink at the edges. I stopped by the river, the same spot I used to stand at months ago when everything felt impossible. Now, it felt like the world had exhaled, and so had I. I took a photo, not of the view, but of my shadow on the pavement. Proof that I was still here. Still standing. Peace didn't come as a victory. It came as acceptance. The acceptance that I didn't need to be extraordinary to matter. That my worth wasn't something to earn, it was something I already had. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was chasing anything. Rejoining the world wasn't like flipping a switch. It was more like learning to breathe again after being underwater for too long. Awkward. Unsteady. But necessary. At first, I still kept my distance. I'd go to the market, exchange polite words with vendors, but never linger. I'd nod to neighbors in the hallway but avoid small talk. After years of living through screens and silence, real human connection felt foreign, like a language I used to speak but had forgotten the grammar of. But the world, as it turns out, is patient. It waits for you to show up. One afternoon, I ran into Anna at the community kitchen again. She waved at me like she'd known me forever. "We're short-staffed today," she said. "You in?" I smiled. Always. By the end of the day, we were covered in flour, laughing like children as someone accidentally spilled an entire bag onto the floor. It was simple. Stupid. Wonderful. That night, I walked home under a sky full of stars I hadn't noticed in years. They'd always been there, I'd just been too busy to look up. After that, I started showing up more often, not just at the kitchen, but in life. A local bookstore had a community night every Thursday, open mic readings and small art showcases. I went one evening, camera in hand, just to watch. Someone read a poem about losing their father, and halfway through, I felt tears running down my face. No one stared. No one judged. It was the first time in years I cried in public, and it felt like release. A man next to me, gray hair, kind eyes, handed me a napkin. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. "Yeah," I whispered. "It really is." We talked for a while after the event. Turned out he used to be a teacher, retired now, spending his days writing short stories that no one will ever read, as he put it with a smile. But that wasn't true. I read one later when he emailed it to me, and it was full of life. Honest. Imperfect. Real. That's the thing about stepping back into the world, you realize it's not made of noise or perfection, but of people quietly trying to make sense of it all, just like you. A few weeks later, my sister invited me to a family dinner. I almost said no. I'd missed so many before that it felt easier to stay away than explain my absence. But this time, I went. When I walked in, Mom's eyes widened, then softened. She hugged me like she was afraid I'd disappear again. "You look good," she said, but her voice trembled. "I'm getting there," I answered. And I meant it. The dinner was loud at stories, laughter, interruptions, the kind of chaos I used to find exhausting. But this time, it felt like music. My nephew, who'd grown at least a foot since I'd last seen him, asked, "Are you still the boss?" I laughed. "Not anymore." He frowned. "Then what are you?" I thought for a second and said, "Still figuring that out." He nodded like that made perfect sense. Kids are good at understanding the things adults overcomplicate. Later that night, Mom found me in the kitchen, washing dishes. Old habits die hard. She put a hand on my shoulder. "I worried you'd never come back," she said softly. "I didn't," I replied. "Not really. But maybe I came back to something better." She smiled, the kind of smile that comes with understanding, not approval. We didn't need to say more. After that, I started visiting more often, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. I helped my sister's kids with homework, cooked dinner with Mom, listened to her talk about her garden like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. And maybe it was. One evening, Julia texted me a link. "Thought of you," she wrote. It was a local photography contest theme, Moments That Matter. I almost didn't enter. I'd never cared for competitions. But something about it felt right. Not to win, just to share. I submitted a photo I'd taken weeks earlier, Anna laughing in the kitchen, sunlight cutting through the flower-filled air like gold dust. I didn't win. But the photo was displayed at a small cafe downtown. And one day, as I sat there drinking coffee, I watched a stranger stop in front of it, smile, and take a picture. For some reason, that meant more than any promotion I'd ever received. It wasn't about recognition anymore. It was about connection. That night, I walked home slowly, the city lights flickering above me. I passed by my old office building again. The windows glowed just like they always did, filled with people chasing deadlines I once thought defined me. But instead of bitterness, I felt something different, compassion. I wished them peace. Because I finally understood, you don't have to abandon the world to find yourself. You just have to return to it differently. To show up not as who it wants you to be, but as who you are. And maybe that's what living really is, not achieving, not proving, but simply returning, again and again, to the parts of life that make you feel human. It's strange how life circles back to the places you once swore you'd never return to. Not because you're stuck, but because you've changed enough to see them differently. It happened on an ordinary Thursday. I was walking home from the cafe, my camera slung over my shoulder, when I found myself standing outside my old office building. The same glass facade, the same sterile lights flickering through the windows, but it didn't feel intimidating anymore. It just felt small. Contained. A world I'd once believed was the center of everything, now just another building among many. I stood there for a long while, watching the silhouettes of people moving behind the glass. One of them, a man in a crisp white shirt, reminded me of me. Head tilted toward a screen, face pale from the glow of artificial light, phone buzzing endlessly. I almost wanted to go in and tell him to stop. To breathe. To walk outside and see the sky before it gets dark. But I didn't. Because some things you can't tell people. They have to fall apart a little on their own to understand what wholeness really means. I took a picture of the building. Not out of bitterness, out of gratitude. Because that place, for all its pressure and pain, had been part of my story. It had broken me, yes. But it also forced me to rebuild differently, deliberately. On my way home, I passed the river again. The same spot where I used to stand when everything felt like it was collapsing. Now, the water was calm. The air smelled like rain and autumn leaves. I leaned on the railing and just listened to the hum of the city, the laughter of strangers, the rhythm of the world carrying on. That's when I realized something. Healing isn't a finish line. It's not the grand ending of a story, it's the quiet understanding that there never was one. It's waking up and choosing again. To show up. To forgive. To live. When I got home, I went through the photos I'd taken over the past year, all those fragments of life I tried to capture. There were no perfect shots, no masterpieces. But together, they told a story. A story of someone who'd lost himself, wandered too far, and somehow, without even noticing, found his way back. I printed one photo. The very first one I'd taken after I quit, the empty street at dawn, sunlight breaking over the skyline. Back then, it had felt like an image of endings. Now, I saw it for what it really was, a beginning. I framed it and hung it by the window. Every morning, when I open the curtains, it's the first thing I see. A reminder that no matter how dark it gets, the light always finds a way in. One evening, Anna came by with a bag of groceries. She'd started calling me her assistant chef, which I pretended to hate but secretly loved. As we cooked, she asked, "Do you ever miss it? The old life?" I thought for a moment, stirring the pot. Sometimes, I said honestly. But only the parts that weren't real. She smiled. Then maybe that's how you know you're finally living the right one. We ate dinner by the window, watching the city flicker to life as the sun went down. And in that small, ordinary moment, no applause, no achievements, no audience, I felt something I'd spent years chasing. Not happiness. Not success. Peace. It didn't roar. It didn't shine. It just settled like a gentle weight in my chest, steady and quiet. I still have bad days. Days when the old ghosts come knocking, when doubt creeps in, when the world feels too heavy again. But now I know they'll pass. Because I've learned that strength isn't about never breaking, it's about learning how to rebuild, again and again, with softer hands. And maybe that's what it means to be whole. Not perfect. Not untouchable. Just honest. Human. Alive. As I looked out the window one last time that night, the city stretched out before me, vast and alive. I took a deep breath and whispered, not to anyone, not even to myself, but to the quiet. I'm here. And for the first time, it felt like enough.